Mr. Bump, could you send me, I don't seem to have the Zoom link. Can you send me that briefly? Thank you. Oh, wait, no, I think, nope. Maybe I do. Yeah, actually, if you could send it to me, I'd appreciate it. Madam Director, I see we have a full quorum. I apologize for being five minutes late. Everybody was trying to get organized, but without objection, let me hand this to you. I think this meeting will be important. It will be a first of several meetings, and I know we had, I believe, probably around 5 times the requests as we had money in this particular pot, but to let people understand that there are other opportunities coming, I thought I'd just turn it over to you if you could enumerate those.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. That is correct, Mr. Chairman. We had 113 funding recommendations today. There were a lot of good projects. Unfortunately, we only have $50 million in the ARPA Water and Sewer Fund to be able to award today. It's not a statement on the need or the number of projects, but there are other sources of funding. There will be later, I think in December, with hopefully the awarding to be early 2023, the local government ARPA funds, those will be available. There are also plans to take advantage of the IIJA funding, which is the infrastructure bill. There's always the SRF loan programs, the IRA program. Beth, what am I missing? But the point being is that there are going to be additional opportunities for funding for these sorts of projects moving forward.
Very good. And I think you mentioned that there may be a representative here that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe Representative Simpson is here, and he also wanted to share his thoughts too.
Very good. Good to see you, sir.
It's a pleasure. Sorry, we're used to seeing green there, not red.
I noticed that the other day myself. So.
Governor Gordon, board members, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm Representative Evan Simpson from Lincoln County. I'd like to address you as the chairman of the Select Water Committee today. A little over a year ago, our committee sat in Casper and discussed the option of building this program out of the ARPA funds. And we discussed the percent ratio of grant and local match. We talked about the $7.5 million maximum. And of course, how much money to request from the ARPA funds to come in to this program was a big discussion. We knew there was a pent up demand for water and wastewater, but we didn't know exactly how much. And our original bill that we processed through the legislature was for $95 million. And of course, that went around in circles and ended up being at 50 million. Governor Gordon and I had discussions about trying to preserve some of that ARPA money in case a COVID variant came back through the wash this last year. And we're so glad that didn't happen. And so what I'd like to submit to you today, folks, is next week in our Select Water Committee, we have a piece of legislation being brought forward to extend this program. 50 million simply is not enough to even put a dent in this. The director just talked about other programs, and they're all there, and we're going to try to take advantage of all of them. But this one is unique in that there are very few federal strings attached, and an 85% grant really reaches out and touches those specific infrastructure needs that simply can't be afforded in many of our communities. And so the piece of legislation we're going to introduce next week in the committee is to extend this program. We love your staff. They have done such a marvelous job sorting through all these applications. We don't want to reinvent that. What we'd like to do is inject some new money into this program specifically from the remaining ARPA funds and allow you to just go further down the list and pick up some more community projects. I've penciled that out, and if we added 32 more million to the program, we could pick up all the projects that currently score 15 and 16 on your list. If we added an additional 16 million, we could go all the way down and pick up all the projects that scored 14. And that would be our target. But Governor, we're sensitive to all the other needs in the state, and we realize there are going to be many worthy causes. And so we'd actually look to your staff for recommendations on how much money you'd recommend we plug in there, whether we can afford to go all the way down to the bottom of the 14 list, or whether we need to stop with the 15 scoring point. But as a minimum, the 32 million is what we'd like to slide in. And of course, it's got to go all the way through the legislature and the Appropriations Committee, which I am upstairs sitting in this morning. But we'd really like, folks, the primary reason for allocating a large chunk of this ARPA money towards our community's water systems is we believe firmly that the most important natural resource in the state of Wyoming is water. And that's evidence as we travel around the state. Places that do not have water are sagebrush and antelope, and communities that have access to water have a vibrant community and are successful. So we'd encourage you, Governor, to give us some feedback in our committee of how much money you want us to put in that bill, and then to support that bill going forward.
Thank you, Representative, and happy to support the idea and work with you on what that funding stream should be. And, you know, it was interesting to see the quality of the applications that came forward and understand the need. You know, I think we had a pretty good concept of there were a lot of needs out there developing over the last couple of years, but I think now extending this program makes a lot of sense, and maybe we can pick up a number of these communities. So I really appreciate your leadership on that, Representative.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Representative,
Yeah.
Treasurer may have a question.
A couple of things that, as we went through this, came to my attention as far as how some of these things are actually overlapping with what Select Water can do. And Select Water does transmission, but they don't do distribution. And I think kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at developing caps, perhaps, and also pay particular attention, I think, in the cap structure as far as the ability to pay versus those folks who have, I mean, I just had a sit down with the mayor from Cali yesterday, I think, as most of us did, that essentially they don't have the ability to raise their revenue by sales tax or practically any other means. So kind of, you know, look and see whether or not there's a way to kind of fine tune that so we make sure that as these lead abatement restrictions are coming in, or that we might kind of have this program be focused in areas that this might be the only place where there is an alternative funds, or this could be maybe the first place for some of those folks that and some of the projects that aren't eligible in Select Water.
Governor, may I comment to that?
Please, yeah.
Thank you. You've got a really good point. And that was part of the criteria the staff evaluated this go around. So the question of overlapping applications, our communities have had to do that because they knew that there was very few selected here. And so that'll be part of the process. But one thing for note for you, in the Select Water program, through the Water Development Commission, we receive severance tax monies. And up until now, we've been able to fairly fund most projects that are eligible through that stream of money. Next week, for the first time that I know of, in the last 30 years I've practiced here in this area, there is not even close to enough money in the program to fund the projects we have. We're turning many projects away next week because of that. And so, but yes, I concur. The staff is going to work with us and we'll be able to sort all that through to find the right funding for the right size of community. And
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I know when I was in Select Water, we had a backlog of over $1 billion in infrastructure that was going to deteriorate just because concrete lasts 50 years. And after that, you're going to have problems. So Select Water does a lot of stuff in other areas rather than this municipal in political subdivisions. So yeah, but the Craig report, I think, is going to be, that should put a smile on your face on some of these too.
it certainly has. We received that report yesterday, and that's encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Mr.
Representative.
Chairman.
Madam Auditor.
Just since we're in a public forum, I would just really like to thank Representative Simpson for his service. He won't be returning in January, is my understanding. And he's been very kind and he's very quiet. He doesn't like to hear himself talk. And so when he does, it's a good idea to sit up and listen. So thank you and we'll miss you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. I would echo those comments, but I know you may be gone from the legislature, but your service to the community and to the people of Wyoming continues, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Very good. Madam Director.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I should have started by saying this is a State Loan and Investment Board special meeting. It has been publicly noticed. The only agenda item today is J1, which is to consider 113 funding recommendations for Chapter 41 Water and Sewer ARPA grants. And just as a little bit of background, Mr. Chairman, to sort of set the table before we get started, the American Rescue Plan Act Water and Sewer Program was created during the 2022 budget session of the Wyoming Legislature. The legislation appropriated $50 million to the Office of State Lands and Investments from the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund for grants to be awarded by the State Loan and Investment Board for eligible water and sewer projects. Specifically, the appropriation is for competitive grant funding to cities, counties, special districts, and tribal governments for eligible water and wastewater projects. As Representative Simpson mentioned, the maximum grant for any single project is $7.5 million, and each grant is conditioned upon the match of funds in the ratio of 85-15. All grants issued must meet all applicable federal eligibility and must be obligated by December 31st of 2024 and fully spent by December 31st of 2026. Funds may only be used on costs incurred on or after March 3rd of 2021. The board promulgated Chapter 41 rules for the administration of this program. The rules are drafted to comply with both federal and state law. When awarding a grant, the board must consider whether the project is an eligible expenditure under the state and federal law, whether the project will inure to the benefit of the citizens of the state, and whether the project represents a prudent use of the funds. With respect to OSLI's analysis, we received 113 applications totaling $225,481,868. We accepted these applications from July 1 of 2022 through August 12th of 2022. Each submitted application has been reviewed for ARPA eligibility by the Wyoming Budget Department and its consultant, Clifton Larson Allen, as well as the Attorney General's Office. To assist the board in sort of its initial sort through of the applications, We calculated a score for each project as was required by Section 9 of the rules. A technical review of these applications was also completed by the Wyoming Water Development Office and the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality for eligibility, feasibility, and compliance issues. I believe we do have some members of those sister agencies here today, should the board have any questions. We note that the attachment to the board matter includes the list of all applicants ranked by the raw prioritization score. The board may utilize the raw score in its funding decisions and can fund on that basis, but it's not required to. Because the total amount requested was substantially higher than the $50 million appropriation, OSLI and our partner agencies applied a few additional principles in sorting through the raw scores to arrive at the recommended funding decisions, and I'll just articulate those quickly. As the starting point, we looked at the raw priority score using the criteria under the rules. If an applicant had submitted multiple applications, we only looked at the first priority application as ranked by the applicant. OSLI and the partner agencies then considered all applications in each scoring band. So where they scored the same number of points, we then put them on the list with respect to the highest score, and then made our way down through that. If enough funding remained to fully fund each project in the score band, each project was recommended for funding, and then we moved on to the next highest score band. Using this methodology, all of the first priority projects scoring 18 points or higher were recommended for full funding. At the 17-point score band, the remaining project funds were insufficient to fund all first priority projects. So we recommended funding in that score band, beginning with the smallest to the highest. This allowed nearly all the 17-point applications to receive funding. When the remaining funding was insufficient to fully fund the last 17-point application, we decided to recommend awarding the remaining funds to that last application as part of a partial funding grant. That applicant was contacted, and we were assured that if in fact that partial funding were awarded, that project could indeed be completed. So with that, Mr. Chairman, the board matter itself contains a table detailing the 19 applications recommended for funding today, 18 for full funding, 1 for the partial, as I mentioned. It is our recommendation that the board approve the 113 water and sewer ARPA grant funding recommendations as described in the board matter. And as I mentioned, that would be funding those first 19 applications and non-funding of the remaining. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we would stand for any questions and would take your direction with respect to how to go further.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Any questions? Well, first off, let me just say thank you for processing. This is not an easy task, and for all those who applied, very much appreciate the work you put into it. And I don't think anybody should leave here today thinking that they haven't actually made their case. And I think you heard from Representative Simpson a real desire on our part to try to figure out how to fund as many of these as we possibly can. And it may take a little bit of time to do all of that. It has been my concern over my time, both as treasurer and now as governor, that we have seen as infrastructure in our towns and counties, particularly our smaller towns, has had challenges. And so, you know, I think this is a great opportunity for us to be able to start to address those, and hopefully over the next several months we can address even more of those. But let me turn it over to the board to see how they would like to proceed.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah. Were there any of these applicants that scored 18 or higher that didn't receive any funds solely, that may have been taken out of the consideration because it was not their number one pick. Even though they had a great score, necessarily their number one pick scored lower than, say, their number 2 or 3.
Mr. Governor,
Ms. Blackwell.
Mr. Treasurer, there are 6 projects on that were higher than 18 that received no funding because they were a lower priority for the entity per their own individual ranking of their applications.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that, everybody that was 0 above that 18, those were all taken out primarily because they didn't rank as high as what the, I mean, that was a 2 or 3 and not necessarily their 1.
Mr. Governor, Mr. Treasurer, given the number of applications we received and the amount of money that was in excess of the $50 million that we had to award, we typically, like we do with MRG, we considered entities first priority projects only.
Yeah.
This kind of leveled the playing field. It required the entities to tell us what's most important to them, what project is most important to them. So we took what was most important to each individual applicant and considered those applications. Most of the applicants that have a 0 funding higher on the list, all but Glen Rock and Upton receive funding later on in the list where their priority 1 is funded. So there's only 2 entities truly that have a 0 and didn't get their first
Okay,
priority
that's-
funded.
Thank you for that explanation. That's what I was trying to drill down to, is Glendo and Upton that had high-ranking projects but didn't receive any funding in any other way.
Glen Rock, not Glendo.
Oh, Glen Rock. Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Further questions? Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question I have, as I've been reading down through all these, had one problem that one of them, North Sweetwater Water and Sewer District, unfortunately, as I was going through the folder, the ARPA justification in the folder that's labeled for them is not Northwest Sweetwater, it's Teton Village. So I don't have that ARPA justification for Northwest or North Sweetwater.
That's an error on our part. I will email my people upstairs and see what we can get for you.
Okay. Along with that, have a question on one that kind of caught my eye, number 1071, the town of Burlington. That is a project where they are, every year they're out of compliance with DEQ and EPA because of that. And this one small project for them would bring them into compliance with no land purchase with that. It's just putting that aerator system into their lagoon. And I'm kind of wondering why they rated so low. And also their money is, they got some skin in the game. It's all their money on the match. Whereas some of the others, it's all loans and grants in the match. So that one has some concern for me.
Mr. Governor, Mr. Secretary, the town of Burlington received a few priority points because their project is ready. They only provided the minimum 15% match, so they didn't receive priority points there. They did receive priority points related to the fact that their match funding is themselves. This project was not on the intended use plan. They have a low population, so they received priority points for that. Through our calculation, they did not have any revenue loss, so they didn't receive priority points for that. They didn't receive priority points related to incurring higher costs. They didn't receive priority points related to their AMHI to the states. Theirs is 104.64. This did receive priority points related to compliance, but not priority points for regionalization or having a plan to finish the project.
Thank you. So, members of the board, I think we built a scoring matrix. I think the scoring matrix was intended to be as clinical as possible. I think the results you see before you, that, as I said at the beginning, doesn't mean that the other projects aren't meritorious and can't be addressed over time. I do think that the recommended list we have in front of us is the product of the rules that we provided. So I think it's appropriate to ask questions about specific projects, but I'm really very hesitant to try to redo the work here. You know, because we could have a very, very long day without really doing our job particularly well. And again, you know, I want to stress the fact that hopefully we get more money coming this direction. We know that there are lots of issues around the state. Many more that probably aren't addressed even in the sheet that we have. So, you know, I want to caution us about trying to break down in too great a detail here. Madam Auditor, I think you had your hand up or you were reaching for.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're right, and I think we're all in a pickle knowing that the hardest thing would be to find a project on this list that doesn't need to happen or doesn't deserve funding. And those, the rules in our scoring matrix, which is, you know, it's an imperfect model, but it's one that we put out for public comment. We accepted public comment. We made tweaks as we felt fit, and, you know, have instructed OSLI to calculate based on that so that we had a reliable place to start. And Mr. Chairman, I know we could talk about that all day, but at the end, this is math that we can't get out from under. And I'm ready to attempt a starting motion, Mr. Chairman, if it's in order, but I can hold off if you would like.
Yeah, just hold off for a second. What's, Mr. Superintendent, do you have a comment you wanted to make? It looked like you were reaching forward.
No, I wasn't reaching, but I hear what you're saying, Governor, and what Auditor Racinas is saying, and it's a solid point. I guess I would want to hear a little bit more from Treasurer Meyer and Secretary Allred on some of their perspectives on some exceptions to this.
Okay. Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think the only place where I have a personal, maybe a personal request, I guess this goes back to my old round robin days on appropriation. So, which, looking at the small area there on the town of Upton for that 198, that seems like something that scored really high. I know it was their number 2, but it was up in that high score. And I think we have to, you know, as you said, pay attention to the scoring matrix that we had. And they don't get funded any other place in the process. And I think the other one was Glen Rock. That was their 3rd priority. Upton's was their 2nd. I know the transmission main can be that could be something that could be funded under select water and a lot of other different areas that I'd like to, I guess, make a motion that we take 99,000 out of 1012, which would be the city of Gillette, and 99,000 out of 1041, which would be the city of Green River. Those were at the cap of 7.5 million. I asked staff to see, if we went down to a cap of 5 million, what that would do, which that would allow us to fund, I think, quite a few more if we did do that. But I think that's something we should really look at in the future years, or the future programs. But I would make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to give
Well,
those.
if I could hold you up on that motion for a second. And the reason I want to do that is that I'd like to have Mark address us from the town of Upton, number one. And then, as we look at subtracting from other awards, I'd like to understand if that compromises the projects, Mr. Treasurer, beforehand.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I might add, I think we have a question of eligibility of the project that Mr. Treasurer is talking about. And so I would,
Right, and that was the reason I wanted to have
Mark
Mark come up, because I know this is a project, Mark, that you've brought to us before, and I really appreciate you being here. And
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mark Lindstrom, Superintendent for the town of Upton. And this highway crossing is under Highway 16. It was part of a project from one we did in, I think it was 2012 or 13, I think. I can't remember anymore. It was, what we're doing is, this project was to cross the highway to upsize the line for circulation to the south side of Upton. It's on the west side, which we tied in from the industrial park back in, brought our circulation back in from the industrial park from the new water tank that we built. And that was the reason for this project, is to upsize to get the circulation to the south side of Upton.
thank you, Mark. And Beth, do you, I'm sorry, Ms. Blackwell, Mr. Lidstrom. So do you, there was a question of eligibility for this that we wanted to explore with you, if that's possible.
Correct. The issue related to eligibility is you discuss fire protection in your application. And per SRF regulations, fire protection as a primary reason for a project is not an eligible use. So can you address that, please?
Okay, well, I guess the reason I use fire protection is if you increase your circulation, does increase your fire flows. I mean, that's just the basics of the bigger the line, the more fire flow you'll get. If we're gonna feed off a 10-inch line to an 8-inch to bring it down to the south side of town. So I guess that's the big reason I use that verbiage of fire protection, because that is a big issue with communities, is making sure your fire protection is adequate through the whole system. And that's the reason I use that the word fire protection, is there's always part of everybody's mind is, can we fight a fire off of this line?
But Mr. Lidstrom, I think one of the issues was that is, I mean, I understand the reason why you do that, and I don't want to be too
No?
technical about this, but apparently that is not a justification, if I understand correctly, for us to fund that.
Okay. But that's one reason that was in there is because of the water circulation is the big thing, and doesn't help increase our fire protection for that area. But I mean, if that's the way it is, I just,
And Mr. Lidstrom, I guess, I was thinking this project you've been looking at for, I think, at least 2 years, haven't you?
yeah,
And so,
yep, I have been. It's part of our capital improvement plan and everything, and it's on the IUP and everything. So it's just a project that was shovel ready. It can be put out right away, and that was part of it too. So it was ready to go.
Right.
And I thought this would be an opportunity to at least put it before this funding source. So that was
Yep.
another reason too, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Lidstrom. And I hear the Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, and I'm not sure if it's coming across right there, but, you know, and I understand you got 8-inch on both sides, 6-inch underneath that that you want to replace with an 8-inch. And I understand what you're saying, the firefighting, but is that the primary or is it the water circulation? I mean, I understand why you throw the firefighting in there, but is that really the primary reason for that? Or is it more the water circulation? Is that what it's going to do?
The circulation is the biggest thing. You don't want, you know, stagnant waters. And you got bigger lines here. You want to upsize all your lines to the 8-inch and stuff like that. Doesn't make sense to have a big line, small line, and go up to a bigger line again. That was one of the biggest reasons for this project also, because the original 6-inch line was put in long before I was there. And at that time, there was no development that area. There was nothing going on. Now, things have changed. The community has grown in that area. That was the biggest thing, is I just wanted the bigger circulation, more volume to go across that road.
You have a follow-up? I'll see Ms. Blackwell and then the superintendent.
Mr. Governor, we do have representatives from DEQ here as well to talk about this, if anything that Mark or Mr. Lindstrom has said may change their mind. I don't know. I don't want to put them on the spot either.
Right, okay, very good. Mr. Superintendent.
I was just going to ask, if the fire protection piece wasn't the primary motivation, what if he hadn't used that verbiage? Would then it be a more eligible application?
Ms. Blackwell, did you hear the superintendent's question?
If the fire protection piece was not the primary reason, or the primary motivation, what if he had not used that verbiage? Then would the application have been more eligible or eligible?
As a non-technical person, I would say yes, but I think I need to defer that question to the technical staff, because that's what they do.
And we'll get to that in just a moment. Mr. Lidstrom, one question I have, and the reason I mentioned that this has been a project, you have done an amazing job, and you've been a very generous person as the town manager, at times solving problems for other communities and held back on some of these. And I guess, one of the concerns I have is just wondering if this is a project that could wait a little bit to pick up maybe some of the other funding down the road.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. I mean, I don't want to rock the boat here. It was just a project that we brought forward. I mean, I don't want to take away funding from other people. I know how I would feel, and I don't want to do that either. So, I mean, if there was something that another project didn't meet eligibility, that's my projects are there for. I mean, it's not something that I can't hold off on. I appreciate everybody's efforts and everything. I mean, if there was a way we could do it, hey, great, super. I can definitely make it happen. But I don't want to take away from somebody else's either to fund something that, I mean, I'm making it work. I'll continue to make it work, and I'll come back again. As everybody knows, I don't go away very easily. So I do appreciate everybody's efforts, but I mean, it's not an end-all thing, and I don't want to make it that way either, and I don't want to take away from anybody else. And I do appreciate everybody who's tried to make this project work, but I'd rather not rock the boat with this, and we'll just bring it back later. I really would. I feel better.
Well, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I would, and I
So-
do appreciate everybody's efforts to try to make it work, but
Yeah.
I mean, they put a lot of work in this. It's a learning process for all of us, and I just learned a big piece today. I just learned a chunk. So I,
Well, Mr. Lidstrom, you are a remarkable example of how to run a city and a town. And I remember your Christmas Eve digging a ditch and all of that. So I certainly appreciate all of that. I see Keenan back there, so
uh-oh. But anyway, thank you anyway, but like I said, I appreciate everybody's efforts, but I'd just rather not. Like I said, there was something that was ineligible, there was possibility for us to be part of it, great. If not,
Right.
I don't want to take money from somebody else. I
Well,
really
stay
don't.
tuned. We're not done yet. I
I
just
know.
wanted to get some, okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer,
Yeah,
before,
I would kind of like to know the answer to the superintendent's question about whether something that an applicant puts in thinking that it makes the project, more desirable for health and safety reasons, essentially denies them the opportunity of eligibility. To me, if you have more circulation in your water system or more pressure or more volume, it should go without saying, well, you're going to have a better opportunity to fight fires if they show up. But just including that in a grant application throws you out the door on an eligibility technicality. I think everybody needs to know the answer to that in this room. So when they put their application together, they can say, the primary reason for this is not fire protection, and that might seem counterintuitive to how you would prepare a grant. And so I'd like to know that question, because these little technicalities can cause some heartburn and confusion. And that I'd like to get the answer to the superintendent's question.
well, and that's why Keenan's coming up, so.
Or I
Thanks.
can also address that, Mr. Governor, Mr. Treasurer. It depends on the source of the funding completely. If you had put that in an MRG app, it probably would have helped you. However, the eligibility for the ARPA funds are tied directly to the SRF program, and those are conditions of the SRF program rather than specifically of this POP. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Secretary, Keenan Hendon, Wyoming DEQ. With regards to the question on eligibility, we based on our review of the application and materials presented. Based on that information, primarily that project was based on what was submitted, was for fire flow based on our review. However, should that have been modified to say we're looking to increase our circulation, water turnover rates, things of that nature, it would have been SRF eligible, would have been eligible for ARPA funding. So there's, I think 6 or 7 criteria for projects to make them ineligible for SRF funding, and sounds as though we can work with state lands and make sure that information is distributed to future applicants going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hendon. So, questions for Mr. Hendon? Thanks very much. Are there representatives here from the Gillette project? Thank you very much for being here. And as you approach, if you could identify yourself and your name, that'd be great. And this is a process that sometimes gets, we always want to make sure we don't end up, making it so a project can't be funded.
Absolutely.
Or can't be completed by, and usually towns are willing to step forward if they can offer up a little bit. So we've often been able to help projects that haven't been funded.
Absolutely. Good morning, Governor, members of the board. My name is Hyun Kim. I'm the city administrator for the city of Gillette. I have Joe Shane, our city engineer, here with me as well. Mr. Treasurer, to your question, whether our project could take a little less money to help our friends in Upton, I can make that call at this point. Absolutely. If you're looking at paring our project funding down by about $100,000, we'd be more than willing to, at your purview. Absolutely.
Thank you very, very much for that. Any questions?
Mr.
Madam
Chairman.
Auditor.
And thanks for being here. What are your other options for funding this, I guess would be my question. Like, for example, if we, and again, not saying I intend to do this, but if if you received half the funding that was recommended? How would that go forward?
Absolutely. So, Madam Auditor, the City of Gillette has been working on this project for many years at this point. As you see in your packet, our funding is contingent on loans components from the state and local service charges. We've increased our service charges over the last 5 years by a material amount. We will continue to work this project, and should our funding be cut, at the end of the day, we will make this still happen. At the end of the day, it will be on our rate customers as an enterprise activity to bring that up. We are looking at, from this project standpoint, we have a material increase in population in the county. We're serving 40,000 individuals, 11,000 service customers. With this rebuild of our wastewater plant, this is our Headworks project. We have some material developments that we will continue to work with the state on to seek additional funding elsewhere. But, from the perspective of potentially a material half cut to our funding request, that's something we would probably come to the state for at some other point. But we do request that if we could maintain this, we do have a project that is in process right now. Thanks to your staff, we have a commitment here to finish this project on time. We have an $18 million project just for scope for this board. We were requesting $7.5 million, your max. And we understand that's a lot of money when the total funding was $50 million. That being said, we are serving regional customers as well as in-town residents with this project, and we do plead with you for consideration of our request.
Thank you very much. For follow-up?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Member.
And I think Treasurer brought up North Sweetwater Water and Sewer District. Or is there anyone here from the town of Green River? Okay. What was the other one that you were suggesting reducing? City of Green River. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is David Barnhouse, and I'm a representative of the North Sweetwater Water and Sewer District. Would like to thank the State Land and Board and Investment Board and this committee for this grant offer. The district is responsible for the sewer system of the town of Reliance. That it has 253 residents. Our sewer system consists of lagoons and over 1,200 square feet of collection system piping sections, which are likely approaching 80 to 100 years old. We were founded by the Union Pacific Coal Company, and the old tipple still stands today. It's a national thing, the tipple there. But our residents live and work throughout Sweetwater County, and many are retired. We bid our lagoons and collection system rehab system project in 2021. And the bids came in very high, similar to what other communities are experiencing. Supply chain, distribution, and other high fuel prices that were caused by COVID forced us to remove the collection system from the bid and focus on our lagoons. We rebid our project, and without the collection system and the new bid allowed us to complete our lagoon. Rehab, our lagoons are under constant order from DEQ and must be rehabilitated. The funding this board has given us today will allow us to replace and rehabilitate our failing collection system in our town.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary or Mr. Superintendent, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Only I noticed, and unfortunately, again, we don't have the part of their deal here. So looking at the spreadsheet though, and so because there was some stuff missing there, I reached out to some local people there, and from my understanding, you've received a couple other funding at least 2 other times to work on this system. And so this is what, 3rd time that we still have some issues with it. And I do notice that on your matches, I mean, it seems like this is all, there's a grant and a revolving fund loan on there for your matches that none of it's your money on the match. That's part of that, the skin in the game on that. Have you guys increased fees or anything like that to help fund this?
Yes, we have. We've increased our fees to $60 a residence, which is higher than any place in the state of Wyoming. And we also, don't lean on that. We're also trying to do things, what we can do. I'm the wastewater operator, so I get to see it all. And right now, I have got a $50,000 project I'm paying for out of our pocket because we got plugged lines, main lines broke, and plugged lines. And at that time, when they put them in, they were 20 foot deep. Now we're gonna have to go and fix that, and we don't know exactly how we're gonna do it, and that's coming out of our pocket, out of the district's pocket. Everything else, and we've got an amortization and all that set up for that loan. It's gonna cost us $70 grand a year after we get this pond done. Just after that, not counting anything else. And right now, we're working on the ponds. In fact, they've got 3 of the ponds are pretty much complete. They're starting to rip wrap the one pond. We got to put slide gates in all 4 of them. But the number 4 pond is going to be it's a monster. It's going to be mainly a seepage pond. And the rest of them are primary and secondary and cleaning the last one. So we're working on it, but we had to raise our prices. We couldn't, and we can't do it anymore. I mean, $60 is almost ridiculous, but the people were paying it. So I don't know what else to do with it. I wish we could pay more or buy more or do more with our project, but I don't see how we can do it because it's, what, 6 million, I think is what we got in there. I don't have the figures right here in front of me. Our engineer could tell you more about that. He knows all the facts and figures better than I do. I'm the wastewater operator. I'm watching the waste go downhill, and that's what I got to keep doing. Even no matter what we do, I got to do that. So,
Thank you. Would the engineer like to address the? Sure. If you could identify yourself too.
Mr.
Please.
Chairman, members of the board, my name is Brian Finney. I'm with Keller Associates. We're the engineering firm that has been working with the district for the last 10 years on this project. We were here with the request for SRF fund and MRG funds and went through several rounds with that as they received the money. To answer the question, the district immediately after completing the study raised their rates from about $15 a month to $60 a month. And they've maintained that throughout. The reason that, as Mr. Barnhouse spoke, the reason they've been able to accomplish some of the projects on the collection system that have popped up as emergencies because wastewater was backing up into folks' homes is because they had raised those rates and have been setting that money aside in anticipation of closing out the loan at the end of the project. The original project was the rehabilitation of the lagoons, which are under consent order by DEQ because a 3rd lagoon had been built without a permit. And it's appropriate for those lagoons to be rehabilitated. In addition, they've got significant collection system needs, and these needs are now starting to come to the surface pretty significantly. The collection system was built by a mining company, and at that time, regulations were much different than they are today, and really what they were after was getting the man camp flows to a pond outside of the area so it didn't interfere with their primary purpose, which was mining coal. Plain and simple. That's why Reliance exists. It was a man camp for a coal mine. Now, as a thriving community, it has remained. And even though the coal mine is shut down, they are now working through the substandard issues of the sewer collection system. It's a significant need, but because of where bids came in at, we had to start to pare the project back. The original need was replacement of the collection system and the lagoons. The collection system is the reason we put this application forward. And so they are and have been collecting that rate now for about 5 years. They do have some money in the bank that they are using as repairs for these emergencies that are coming up for plugged lines due to root intrusion, plugged lines due to fittings that have finally collapsed and sections of sewer line that collapsed. So they're using that money in emergency situations.
Any follow-up? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. And Mr. Treasurer, I think I was confused. I think I was thinking this was the project you were also talking about, but you were really talking about Project 1041, the wastewater treatment plant replacement facility project for the city of Green River. Is that correct? So is there somebody, and I do see we have a Gordon Robinson wanting to address the board. He's got his hand raised. I'm not sure what that's about. So let's just recognize him to start with, and then we can proceed. Mr. Robinson. Mr. Robinson, if you're trying to address the board, it appears you're muted. He's dropped his hand. Okay, thank you. Please come forward. Thank you. Good to see you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mark Westenscope, Public Works Director, City of Green River. The question had been asked whether those communities with the largest maximum recommendations would be willing or able to see a reduction in that. And the short answer to that is yes. We've been working on the City of Green River wastewater treatment plant since 2014. Had $30 million in loans taken out from the SRF, increased our wastewater rates by threefold with the expectation that they'll continue to increase by at least another 50% over the next several years. Put it out to bid, and bids came in at 150% of where we thought they would be. So here we are again, trying to increase our funding by 150%. We've received an additional $7.5 million through a loan here a few weeks ago, increasing our loan amount. But when we get to talking about a few $100,000 on a project of this size, we can make it work. To the auditor's question, if there were a significant change to the amount, at a certain point, we may need to come back on that loan side again. We have run the numbers for that, and we do know where those would be. But again, we're optimistic. We're ready to put this project out to bid again within the next month, and with your approval and funding, we'll go ahead and do that.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Mr. Superintendent.
Is it too pointed to ask how much less could you take, or are you going to leave that up to us?
I'll leave that up to you.
Thank you. So thank you very much. What I recognize, and the good secretary brought this to my attention just so people understand process. The auditor had a motion that she was prepared to make, and I asked her to wait so we could have a little discussion. The treasurer had a motion he was prepared to make, and I asked him to wait so we could have a little bit of discussion. So that's the order that I have this, and if it makes sense to the board, if there are more matters to discuss, I'm happy to do that. But if the auditor wants to make her motion and then the treasurer wants to amend that motion, then that would be, it seems to me, the appropriate way to approach this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, this is an unpopular motion that I don't want to have to make, but I think we need to be able to get our arms around this before we, all the acrobatics in the world won't stretch the money any farther than there are dollars. So my motion would be that we accept the director's recommendation on all projects scoring 15 and below. So that would be essentially starting page 2 of the packet, starting with 1175 through page 4 of the packet, ending with 1075. And
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, my intent there would be to respect the rules and the scoring system we put in place while leaving us a little bit of discretion for factors that may not have been fully captured in that system.
Okay. Not the motion I had expected, but that's fine. So motion is made and seconded. So it's to remove from the list to do the director's recommendation, on all the projects scoring 15 and below. Is that correct, Madam Auditor? You've heard the motion. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I tell you, as I read through every single one of these, it's really kind of concerning the state of our infrastructure. Like you say, I wish we could take care of more of these. Because it seems like all of a sudden now every single community in the state needs to replace water and sewer lines. Where have we been for the last 20 years? But, and I respect that scoring system, and it looks really good. But again, as I said, I read through every single one, and that one, 1071, Town of Burlington, really stuck out to me. It's a small town, and it has, they're in violation every year now because of that. And I'd sure like to consider that one. As we look at that, I know they've got a low score, but that's their first priority project out of 2. And it's not that expensive of a project compared to some of these others. And I'd really like to consider it.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any heartburn about, letting every member have one project that's maybe not on the do not disturb list brought forward if they want to. I don't have any, but I understand the Secretary's argument on this. If that's an amendment to the amendment, Mr. Chairman, I'd second it.
Mr. Secretary, just so I know, 1071, what page is that on? Page 3?
Page 3, right towards the top.
Okay. Oh, I see it there. Okay. All right. Mr. Secretary, you have you've brought this point forward for discussion. If you want to make an amendment, the treasurer said he would second it, but I know this is probably a bit out of form, but I wouldn't mind hearing from the city of Burlington if they're here. So please, if that's in order, thank you.
Mr. Governor, members of the board, thank you. And thank you for noticing. I'm Jerry George. I'm the mayor of Burlington. I've been there a couple of years, long enough to know that there's a lot of mistakes I can make. I came today intent on reinforcing the idea that, or sharing the idea that, this process is difficult on small towns. I have a full-time job, so does everybody that's worked in the town administration for a generation. We don't know the ins and outs of this process. Our sewer lagoons, we were amazed to find out were so outdated, and we're functioning, we're serving twice as many people as the lagoons were designed for. And we didn't know that until a year and a half ago. So we've been working since then to remedy that. I don't know why our score was a 12. That was shocking to me. I don't understand the scoring system, nor does any other little town, I'm afraid. And I think we just must have made mistakes in that application that we didn't realize we were doing. So if you have questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Mr. George, thank you for being here. And coming from the town of KC, I understand exactly your issues. You know, our past mayors have been a bar owner and the tire and mechanic shop. So obviously, and then all the treasurer is, you know, another person who has her own business. And so I appreciate, and that is something that we're all very, very conscious of. And frankly, you know, I think of Burlington, I think of Otto, I think of Manderson, I think of all of those places, even Emblem. I think about how important it is that we address those concerns. And I think our scoring system was really an attempt to try to make sure that we elevated smaller communities and made it a little bit easier on them. I know Ms. Blackwell remembers that one of the things that has been on my list is to make sure that we do address those small communities. So I very, very much understand the point that you're making, and you have a very good case, and so I truly appreciate that. I also want to say that, you know, there are other rounds of funding coming, and I know that that's not easy to fill out all the paperwork, which is one of the reasons we've tried to get extra staff here to help with smaller communities where people have multiple jobs. Are there questions for Mr. George? Ms. Blackwell.
Mr. Governor, related to filling out multiple applications or whatnot, if they don't succeed in funding today and they want their project considered under the local government program, or if we get another pot of money, we can use the application that was already submitted. So they don't have to complete a whole new application.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer, thank you, Ms.
Are we
Blackwell.
going to use the same scoring system on that application? That guarantees failure.
For the local government program, there's a different scoring system within those rules that lay it out, very different. So how it shakes out with the local government pot, I'm not sure how that'll work, but it is spelled out within the rules of how those will be ranked and scored.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, and this was brought up with some other discussions that we had with other mayors this week, and I'd like to see if we couldn't get the Wyoming Association of Municipalities and maybe even the County Association to maybe work with OSLI and some kind of a educational process where we could regionally go out and just try to get these folks up to speed, because I think that there's a lot of truth in how you fill it out, whether or not you move forward in these things. I know that happened up in Guernsey on some grazing leases where essentially the person that got the grazing leases hired somebody, I think, from the University of Wyoming to actually prepare the lease. And boy, that person just blew everybody out of the water. And so we need to figure out, I think, how to either simplify it, but still get enough points to make reasonable decisions from it, and I think really get that educational process out there, because if they just keep turning in the same quality of application, and there's things missing in it, and I know there's other ones in here we've got that where people haven't done their audits, and that's another thing that there's a lot of towns because of those requirements, and as people move through these different positions, things get left on the table, and there just is government gets too darn complex for folks, and we need to help them, I guess.
Yeah, and Mr. Treasurer, I appreciate that. It's been a song that I've sung for some time, that if we can figure out a way to get smaller communities, and this has been a hope that I've brought up for at least probably 8 years now, that we can start to get, an appreciation of the infrastructure needs in these smaller communities and help to score them and get, where they are. Because otherwise we end up where we were years ago, which is, emergency after emergency. And then it's always a political thing. It's us up here making decisions over our friends. So. Right. Yeah. So. And Ms. Blackwell, and then I have somebody in the back of the room who's raised their hand too.
Mr. Governor, Mr. Treasurer, we have done several training things. I am invited to conferences to train. I think the problem happens because there's a changeover in staff in local governments and the knowledge isn't passed. A lot of times the knowledge of having an approved grant isn't even passed to the next administration. So they don't know they have a $500,000 grant sitting, just waiting for them to spend. So I hear what you're saying. The other thing that is a complication for us is sometimes entities depend solely on their consulting engineer to do the work. And sometimes that doesn't always work out. It just, some people just turn in the same quality application regardless of how many times you fix their application. They just are unwilling to help themselves.
Well, and anyway, I appreciate that, Ms. Blackwell. Let me, please come up and approach if you would like, sir. And Mr. Mayor, thank you. Stay tuned. We may have a couple of.
Could I share one thought with you?
Sure.
I did a quick analysis, and I don't want to be complaining, but I looked at the municipalities of the state by population, and then I compared the grants applied for and those that qualify. In the bottom, the smallest 30 municipalities that applied for grants, they received 5. That's an acceptance rate of about 16%. The top 17, the largest 17 municipalities that applied, they were accepted at a rate about 45%. I totally accept the idea that, it's our responsibility to figure out how to go through this process. But boy, we are a bunch of amateurs, and it's a tough thing to work through. And I think the numbers bear that out.
Sure.
I don't want to be complaining, but
So
it's a real problem.
Mr. George, and I appreciate that. And then that was one reason why I fought to get an engineer in the Office of State Lands and Investment. Mr. Hendon was that engineer specifically to help smaller communities fill out. And the point of the matter is that we leave millions of dollars on the table of USDA loans and grants. And the trouble with those is that they require even more meticulous work. But and so those monies are going to be spent any way they possibly can. And I have wanted to get those dollars into our smaller communities. So I really appreciate this. One thing that comes to mind, and I think the treasurer brought this to my attention, maybe the Wyoming Association of Municipalities ought to provide support to smaller communities, because like you say, you've got to, well, I think you're a farmer, aren't you?
Yeah, actually, I'm a school teacher, but yeah, even some of the trainings, that are during the day.
You bet.
They're hard to get to when you
bet.
When you've got occupations, so.
And for our small communities, you're absolutely right. The resources aren't there. And so appreciate
Thank you very much for your attention.
And Mr. George, just stay tuned here about, I see Mr. Lidston and.
Members of the board, thank you. I'm Ernie Beckley, Mayor of Tensley. And I just wanted the scoring, I just want to address briefly. I understand the reason for the auditor's motion. I think I backed into our number. I don't totally agree with the number it came that they agreed to. But one thing, we gave a lot of points, the numbers gave a lot of extra points to those of us that our AMHI number, ours is an 11, for example, we're pretty low on the rest of the state. We got a lot of points for that. One of the things that I believe that the scoring turns right around and takes away from us is more points. A lot of points were given to projects that were already designed fully or already in process. Also to the projects that had a lot larger percentage of match. They were given 50%. They got a lot more points. I contend that those of us on the lower end, the AMHI, we don't have funds to put a lot of match in. You've given it with one hand and taken away with the other. I can't afford, our project is, almost a $5 million project that we're looking at. We're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, $3 million or $300,000 in design. I can't afford to put that money out there, design a project, if I don't know that I've got the money to finish the project. We don't have that. All of our match was either from the enterprise account or from our general account, which was our 1 cent sales. So it was all local. I mean, we didn't have any loan or anything, but we can't afford to make that kind of a jump, that kind of a gamble. So we get hurt by waiting to be sure that we have it. If that was taken out of the equation, I'm sure it was put in because they wanted to be sure that the project could be completed quickly. My guess is that was one of the things. But it hurts those of us, the Burlingtons, all the rest of us down. I think that under the current scoring, ours, we made a mistake that cost us a point when I look over the application again, but it probably should have been 14 instead of a 12. But if you take that in process or the full design phase, you swap that around, suddenly we're looking at an 18 score instead of a 12. So even if nothing is done on this specific pot of money, I would suggest that you make a change in the scoring to allow those of us that really, really need it. I'm not saying that Gillette, Casper, Teton Village don't need it, but they don't need it the way we need it.
No, I
So,
appreciate that. And what the Midwest and Edgerton are also in the same situation.
Yeah.
So I very much appreciate your comments and, to the point of the rules, we tried to do the best we could, but I think, when the first time you run them, you find the faults. And so I really appreciate your comments on that.
We did all the online training and listened to that kind of stuff. I didn't know the scoring rules until just the day before yesterday or something that we finally found them. I don't know why we weren't looking at them right, or, where we missed where this was coming down in advance, but that's just, it's not wrong. I'm not necessarily fighting those, just trying to bring up that we just feel that they was giveth one and take away the other.
And Mr. Mayor, that's why I think it's really excellent that the Select Water is going to extend this program so that we can kind of maybe pull in some difference and maybe look at the scoring differently too. Mr. Superintendent, or we have Mr. Lidstrom's up here. Do you want to address them?
I'll just add to, my name is Chris Lidstone, and I'm the town engineer for several of the small towns, Dixon, Tinsley, Pine Bluffs. And I would just say the same thing that Mayor Burlington said and Mayor Beckley has just said, is effectively, and I appreciate all the efforts that Ms. Blackwell and her staff have done, and they went through 130 some odd applications and went through it. But the problem with its scoring system really is as everybody has said, it's very similar to the beginning of the ARA program. And some of us are old enough to remember the ARA program, where the government wanted shovel-ready projects. From an engineering perspective, we can turn around a shovel-ready project faster than the government can get money into the towns. I'm a volunteer town engineer. I don't get paid for being town engineer. And these small towns can't afford it. I grew up in Savory, Wyoming, which is definitely a small town. and you deal with these issues where, for me, my pro bono work is engineering. And we can turn things around quickly. And there's been a lot of emphasis, as Mayor Beckley said, between, having projects on the street or having projects on the shelf. And the reality is, I think there should be more to make it more palatable, make more feasible for the small towns who don't have a big budget, who need these grants more than anybody else. I mean, the reality is there should be more emphasis on that smaller municipality.
And thank you, Chris. I appreciate the comments. Any questions? I recognize somebody had a hand up over here. Do you want to approach and address the board? And Chris, as the person's coming up here, I've had several conversations with Mark Pepper from Rural Water, just to sort of try to understand how we can get at the very points that you all are making. And so maybe there's a proposal that we can bring from Rural Water or something like that can address those kinds of things. And as well as anyone that there just is never going to be enough money to do it all, but we need to figure out a way to get it done.
And I'm happy to volunteer my time with Mark. He's a friend and he has helped us out in Slib and Pine Bluffs and Bags and Dixon a number of times. So
Yeah.
I appreciate Rural Water more than any, just because they do provide that level of service to communities that can't afford to, bring in a major engineering firm.
Right.
So, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Treasurer, I'm on the WAM board, and I'll have that discussion with the director today about getting more involved.
Thanks. Here you are. Good to see you.
Mr. Chairman, Board, Lorraine Warner, USDA Rural Development. I heard the governor say some things about USDA and our loan and grant program, and I wanted to make a couple of comments. So first, I don't know if you're all aware of this, but our numbers just came out for 2022. Wyoming was #1 in the state for leveraging funds through USDA Rural Development and Water Development, and that we were actually #1 in the United States. We will work with anyone. Our application now is all online. We have engineers on staff locally in the state. Our main engineer is in Sheridan. We have architects on staff. We have specialists on staff. I make a commitment to you now through my boss, Glenn Pauley, Glenn, raise your hand, that if any town in Wyoming needs help with a SLIB application, with a state revolving loan application, with a rural development application, we'd be happy to partner and help. We have staff that will go to them and help them fill out those applications. I'm retiring soon, but I will be working as a phased retiree for my boss, and he will have me do special projects. We sent back grant money again this year. We sent back loan money. Now, maybe we can't compete with the state on the rates for loans. We don't want to compete. We just want to partner. And that's why we've leveraged with water development, and we've done a really good job. So if you need us, all they've got to do is pick up the phone and call, and we will be there for these small communities.
Ms. Warner,
Thank you.
And your 800 number is what?
My direct line is 307-233-6710.
Thank you, and thank you for being here consistently. We're going to miss you as you retire, but we're going to put a lot of work on your.
And I'll be part-time. I'll still be out there. So
Yeah,
thank you very
and
much.
you have been really wonderful to work with and brought that. And I always come back to the point that we send dollars, that tax dollars that every Wyoming citizen pays for, end up going back to DC or somewhere else on that. So
And
thank
it's
you.
our money. We need to spend it here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So just to level set where we are, we were in the discussion phase of a motion that was first made by the auditor. And then the discussion point that was brought up by Secretary of State Allred was to look at the town of Burlington. And then we heard discussion about the town of Burlington. And so I will recognize you again, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with the motion that's on the table there, I would like to go ahead and propose an amendment that we consider 1071 within that, and then that we go forward with that motion with that one amendment.
So you're removing 1071 from the auditor's motion, is what I understand your motion to be.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I believe the treasurer offered to second it and has seconded it. So we're going to vote on the motion. Is there discussion on the motion? Is there a discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? No. There are 2 noes and 3 ayes. Now we are voting on the motion. The motion is to do the director's recommendation on, which is not to fund everything below 15.
15 and below, Mr.
15
Chairman.
and below, with the exception of 1071, which has been removed from that list. Any discussion on that motion as amended? Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are now, I'm happy to accept a motion. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the discussion there, I really appreciate the generosity of the city of Gillette and the city of Green River that they mentioned in their testimony. And so I would like to make the motion that we accept the recommendations on all the funding with taking $255,000 from the city of Gillette and the city of Green River and funding the town of Burlington. And other than that, that we accept all of their recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that motion. Is there support for that motion?
Clarification, just real quick on the motion, Mr. Chairman, 250,000 from each?
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That would be $255,000. That would fully fund the $510,000 that the town of Burlington has requested.
So is that 255,000 total or from each city?
Mr. Chairman, that would be from each of City of Gillette and the Green River, those two.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr.
Treasurer.
You know, the one part of that motion that I want some clarity on was that it was going to essentially, as it was stated, it would take all the consideration for all the 16s off the table. And I don't think that would probably be appropriate at this time. The motion should probably just say that the money would come from those 2 entities and fund the other one, but not take everything else off the table.
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, with the treasurer's remarks there, I would be happy to amend that. And as he says, that the motion would just be to take the 255 from Gillette and Green River at this time to fund the city of Burlington, and then we can, I guess, have more discussion on the others. So that would be my motion.
So so you're making the motion simply to adjust the funding for the city of Burlington?
That's correct, Mr.
You're not
Chairman.
making a motion on the director's recommendation?
No,
Clarify
I
that. Okay.
believe that there's some more discussion that the treasurer would like. So that would be my motion.
All right. Okay, so is there support for that motion? The
Second.
Secretary's motion. That motion's been seconded.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes,
Sorry to be dense. So this is a due fund recommendation for Burlington?
it is as I understand it, it simply is withdrawing money from the city of Green River and the city of Gillette, but it is not specifically, unless that's your motion.
No,
sir.
that would, Mr. Chairman, that would be my motion, is that would be a due fund there on the city of Burlington.
And Mr. Bump, I know this is a little bit out of order, but this hybrid model, I do see somebody has their hand up, and maybe it's in order, maybe it's not, but I failed to see that a moment ago. I don't know how quickly that hand came up.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay.
Mrs. Cranny?
Yes. Thank you, Governor and members of the board. I just, wanted to, kind of reiterate and support what has been said about small communities. I represent I'm a board member on the Happy Valley Water Improvement and Service District, and it is a little bit complicated for us, as we haven't had as much experience in writing grants, but I do appreciate the board's time to consider us, and hopefully some more funding will be allocated, and that, some of these smaller projects, like ours will be able to receive some funds. We've been working on trying to regionalize our system, and but just wanted to reiterate that, and we have been going through the process with the USDA too, of trying to receive some funding there also, and they actually, just in support of them, they have been really wonderful to help us walk through that process, but it is a process. But thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Hey, thank you, Miss Cranny. Thank you very much. So back in the order that we have, the motion you've heard clarified. So I think your answer is, I hope, received.
Yes, that it is a due fund. It would put Burlington to bed, the motion, one way.
Yep, okay. So that is the motion that is on before us. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So looking for a graceful way to say this, and this is a bit of, I don't mean to sound heartless, but a little accountant tough love perhaps, which is never any fun. The process is difficult. The point system is what we chose, right? It is, like I said, it is imperfect. But we put it out for comment. We agreed upon it. We took comment from cities, towns, and counties who were aware of it. And so I have a lot of sympathy for that. However, and this is something I said about CARES too, if entities are not able to, or if the application or the process is challenging, I get concerned for when the feds show up, because they will be significant. I think we are all sympathetic to that cause. They are significantly lacking in sympathy compared to this board. This is not MRG funding, where the meanest thing we're gonna do is sick Miss Blackwell on you, who is very, very nice but accurate. This is a different level, and if you want the federal money, you have to play by the rules. And those communities that we're talking about, the smallest communities, are in the least apt position to write a check back to the state or to the feds when this comes down. And again, I don't mean to pick on Burlington at all. I'd love to see some of the towns above them funded. Shoshone is near and dear to my heart, et cetera. And I do have concerns, the good mayor, and I appreciate him being here, especially on a school day. I have concerns that he says, well, there must have been a bunch of errors in the application. That concerns me when the federal auditors show up here, because we have to be accountable for what we do. So no offense to Burlington. And again, these are all, we have in any public or private forum not heard that any of these are bad projects. None of these are bad projects. And so I'm going to be a no vote on this because I don't think there's justification right now based on the sort of the guardrails we set for ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer.
To the point the auditor made, can you tell us that whether or not Burlington is eligible to receive the grants under this, or is there some something that popped up as like fire that popped up in the one Upton one?
Ms. Blackwell.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Treasurer, I do not believe there's concerns with eligibility with Burlington.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Further comment?
No.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank those that have showed up to talk. I wasn't expecting the mayor of Burlington. In fact, hadn't even talked to him about this. But as has been mentioned, there's a lot of these small towns that really, I wish we could help out more. And I do appreciate the scoring system and things. And like I said, as I read through every single one of these, on what was provided to us on here, and the thing is that the town of Burlington did jump out at me, because even in DEQ's notes here, that this would help keep it in compliance with DEQ, and they've got problems with compliance with EPA. So, and reading through their notes, that every year, because of the inadequacy of their system, and they're not building new lagoons, they're not doing that. It's just to, put some aerators in there and help their failing system to keep them out of compliance. And I'll tell you, as I've dealt with DEQ and EPA over the years in these issues, they're pretty tough. And unfortunately, Wyoming does not have primacy over ours. We defer to the EPA. And when we have a system that every year is going out of compliance with that really jumped out at me. And, we can't do everybody, you're right. But I'd sure like to get this one taken care of that would get them in compliance. And that's why it just really showed up to me on that. And I see that, I do appreciate the scoring system, and I think they've done just a fantastic job. I'll tell you, over the few days reading over every single one of these things is pretty daunting. And so I appreciate the effort they put in, but I'd just really like to get this town out of non-compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Further discussion? Mr. Superintendent.
I would just say here to what Secretary Allred said.
Okay.
I agree. I think I very much appreciate and respect what Auditor Racinas is saying. Tough love is always appropriate. But just like in parenting, there's some necessary and rare exceptions. And I just agree with Secretary Allred on this. Let's help Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. So the motion before us is to do fund Burlington fully at $510,000. And that would then, I'm assuming that then funds also, if the motion is consistent, that would also fund the city of Gillette and Green River at the reduced amounts. Is that true?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Madam Auditor.
Mr. Chairman, now I'm again confused by the motion. Is this a due fund motion on Burlington, Green River, and Gillette? Or just Burlington?
That is my understanding of the motion, if we're consistent across the spectrum there. And that, Mr. Secretary, I just wanted to make sure we are clear on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Let me let the secretary.
That would be correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, I think what we were doing, if we're gonna have flexibility in the rest of the process, is that it more likely than not should be a due fund Burlington, but just a reduction in those two that have already had that. Their status would be the same as it was before, only at a reduced rate. That's how I thought the motion was supposed to be proceeded.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. The treasurer has clarified, that we go with what he's
Okay.
he's proposing.
All right.
And understand.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patrick Miller, Wyoming Attorney General's Office. That, I believe, was the original motion, was just a due fund for Burlington. And then as a matter of record keeping over here, we will note that that would be the likely source of those funds. But I don't believe the motion would encompass necessarily a reduction in funding to those entities yet because they haven't been funded at all. So we'll make the notes on our
But it's the
spreadsheets.
recommendation that comes out of this.
Correct.
So
And if it would be to the pleasure of the board, we can share the spreadsheet to the Zoom meeting so that everyone's
no,
looking
that
at the
would be
same
fine.
numbers.
I just, with the way the motion was originally posed was just to take 255 out of each of Gillette and Green River.
Correct.
And then it turned into a motion to fund.
Which was odd because they haven't
Burlington.
been correct, which
And then
it was an odd.
And then I just wanted to clarify, if that's what we're doing with that motion, are we also then funding the others? And it's clear that both Gillette and Green River are still open for further reductions. So
Precisely. It was odd that we were removing funding that hadn't been granted yet. So I believe we've sufficiently clarified that.
as is everyone else on the list here. I want to make, my concern here is that we not be political about saying we don't like Campbell County or we don't like Sweetwater. And just because they got the biggest awards, they get the biggest hits. That I just wanted to be really clear that we've got to have a rigor to how we do this. And so I very much appreciate the clarification on this. So the motion is, at this point, a due fund for Burlington and a reduction in the recommended amount for Green River by $255,000 and a reduction in the amount for Gillette by $255,000. Is everyone clear on that? Okay, further discussion? Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays?
No.
And I am a no on that. So, table is open now for items that are ranked from 16 and above. So those are the items on page 1 of 4. And you also have a recommended list, which has been modified by the last action, of projects that scored 17 and above. So what is the pleasure of the board? Huh? Okay. Is there a motion?
Did you have more? Kristen's got to do some math. The auditor's going to do some math, and that may actually encompass something that I was considering. So until she gets that put forward, I'm going to just kind of.
The auditor has asked for a quick break. Madam Director, is there any problem with doing that?
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be fine.
Okay, great, thanks. I had, during the interim, I had a quick conversation with the mayor of Edgerton, Midwest. Shoshone, I'm sorry. Yes, would you like to come up, Mr. Mayor? I'm sorry, I apologize. And just, you asked to address the board and we all want to buy your town hall, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, and thank you, and I'm sorry.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. I just wanted to touch a little bit on your discussion is either 15 or 16.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you. I know the discussion was possibly at 15 or 16 points by the scoring system to eliminate, because there's potentially some other funding that may come down the pike in a few months. I would like to suggest that you don't do that. Just like Burlington, why they scored 12, I don't know, but with talking with the mayor, and it was recognized here by the board of Burlington's need and unable to be able to fund that. I think the board did a real good thing by elevating they were 12 points to be considerate to their funding, because it was a need. One of the reasons I'm down here in Cheyenne, even though we weren't on the list and we had 3 proposals, they all scored 13, was in the past, the board and state of Wyoming has done very well on helping funding the mid-sized and smaller communities that have trouble doing these projects for ourselves. And I applaud you for that. But I'm just, I would suggest possibly to continue everybody that's on that list, in case after further review, there may be another Burlington that jumps up, maybe a Shoshone or somebody else that might not. And I know the point system was developed and through a lot of hard work and everything, and it is what it is. And but also there's probably the communities that can afford a professional staff stuff. Probably we do have issues probably working with that. I believe I'm also on the board of directors of WHAM, and I talked with Dave Frazier day before yesterday on this. He was going to be here today, but he had a meeting he had to go to. But I believe we can turn a bad thing into a good, and obviously this is staring at us, and it's been at it a while, to try to use the resources of the WHAM to help smaller communities. And I know some of the larger communities will reach out and help the smaller communities also. But I would just ask that we continue. Don't remove us from that. Don't remove the lower numbers off in case there's another Burlington that under further review that might jump up and say, well, maybe we can find a way to fund them. I know our SCADA system is the main reason I was here, because we have trouble funding that anywhere else, because they don't want to, but it's also an important part of what we need. And I know it was mentioned fire suppressant doesn't meet the criteria for this round of funding, but that's also an important part for us, give us warnings, like when our water tank drained before a boiler, because we lose our fire suppressant when that happens.
Right.
And,
right.
So but I know that doesn't qualify for this, and that wasn't one of the reasons we did, but that is, part of the reason. So, but I appreciate you giving me this time to get on my soapbox and speak.
Thank
I'll
you.
answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions for the mayor?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Madam Auditor.
could we hear an update on all the very exciting looking construction that's going on?
fast lane, their travel plaza is moving along. They hope to get it all enclosed. They just got the pavement done. They're hoping to have work on inside all winter to have it completed. I know there's still some discussion with YDOT on access, and that is still, I just talked with Tim Davis, the owner of Fast Lane, and they're still sorting some of those things out, but it's moving along. It'll be a great addition, I think, to our town. I know we're also looking at, we had a person come in, offer to buy some land we have in town to put in some duplexes for housing, because we're short of housing, so. But yeah, but Fast Lane, that's the big thing, and it's I think it's hopefully be open next spring, late spring, early summer, it'll be going, so. But thanks for asking.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your service on the board of WHAM and for your service as mayor.
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for recognizing me.
Yep, thank you. All right. So I believe that there's a potential for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm ready to make a motion. As you know, we are down to the first page. It's challenging to do these one at a time, so I have sort of a package deal. And of course, that can be tweaked or amended, but changing one number changes them all. So just being mindful of that.
And Madam Auditor, just sort of for the process, if it's with no objection from the board, if there are reductions on the awards here, I'd like to hear from the folks to make sure that that doesn't compromise their project, if that's okay.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, if I do get a second, well, I guess I have to walk through the motion first. I'm
Okay.
going to walk through this pretty comprehensively. We're doing it, is that?
That's fine.
Pretty slowly and pretty carefully so that everybody understands the motion and then can agree or disagree. Okay, so Mr. Chairman, on page 1, labeled Water and Sewer ARPA Grant Program Funding Recommendations, I would move that the first 3 projects on the list, Town of Saratoga, Town of Guernsey, Broken Wheel Ranch Improvement Service District, those are all funded at the recommended amount. The next project, I would accept that recommendation as well, City of Sheridan, which is a 0 funding recommendation. Town of Dayton, 1209, I would move full funding on that project. Next project, 1054, North Sweetwater Water and Sewer District. We would remove 1 million from that project for a due fund of 5.2 million. Next project, Town of Encampment, due fund at the full recommendation. Next project, City of Sheridan, 1014. We would reduce that by 1 million for a due fund of 2,840,000. Next project, 1098, Town of Alpine. I would move Director's Rec of no funding on that project. Next project, City of Gillette, 1012. We would be removing 2,255,000 from that project for a due fund of 5,245,000. Next project, Town of Upton, move Director's Rec of 0 funding. Next project, City of Mills, move due fund at the full recommendation. Next project, Town of Glenrock, move the director's recommendation of 0 funding. Next project, City of Casper, move do not fund. So we would remove, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. We would remove $2 million of that project. So a due fund of $1 million. Next project, City of Torrington, 1045, move full funding on that project. Next project, Melody Ranch, move full funding. Next project, City of Laramie, move Director's Rec of 0 funding. Next project, City of Laramie, 1188, move Director's Rec of full funding. Next project, City of Riverton, 1138, move Director's Rec of full funding. Next project, Green River Rock Springs Sweetwater County Joint Powers Water Board, 1213, move Director's Rec of 0 funding. Next project, City of Green River, 1041, we would remove an addition, well, let's see, the total funds removed would be $1,765,000. So a due fund recommendation of $5,735,000. Next project, Town of Alpine, 1068, full funding. Next project, Town of Grable, 1004, move full funding. Next project, 1203, Central Wyoming Regional Water Systems Joint Powers Board, move Director's Rec of full funding. Next project, 1174, Teton Village Water and Sewer District. We would reduce this further and receive partial funding, so a due fund of 540,959. Next project, Town of Dixon, 1051, move full funding of 575,400. Next project, Town of Glenrock, 1129, move Director's Rec of 0 funding, as that is a secondary priority for that town. Next project, Town of Big Piney, 1204, move full funding of $753,000. Next rec, Town of Glenrock, 1118, move full funding of $1 million. Next rec, Town of Afton, 1055, move full funding of $1.275 million. Next project, Town of Star Valley Ranch, move full funding of $1,399,024. Next project, Town of Upton, 1171, move full funding of $1,445,000. Next project, City of Cheyenne, 1223, move Director's Rec of no funding. And final project, Mr. Chairman, Town of Dubois, 1205, move full funding of $1,971,653. And just a few notes on that, but before you ask for a second, Mr. Chairman, what I tried to do was capture some of those characterizations of our cities and towns and counties that maybe were not captured by the scoring system that we set in place. Hopefully this is a good balance, or at least a first try.
Okay, well, thank you. And Madam, I think you and the treasurer both walked through this. I think you're offering the reasoning that we tried to move up some of the considerations that are there. I know that Teton has already had a huge reduction. Teton Village, I hope it isn't just that rich people live there, that we hit them hard. Same issue for Gillette, same issue for, I want to make sure that we are not picking communities that we feel can otherwise afford it just because there are rich people there. Is that a fair statement? I just want to be direct about it.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that is the reason we made the recommendations we have. I do think that some of these projects take into account the testimony we've heard that, you know, some communities have more ability in a tax base to fund some of these projects and some just don't. The other thing that we looked at too is the ARPA funds, when they came to the state and in the guidelines, there's a distinct line drawn within the SLRFA funds between towns of 50,000 or more and 50,000 or less. And that to me is a consideration as well. And so I think those are some of the things that played into our reasoning. And Mr. Chairman, the attorneys were making funny faces at me, so I fear I may have gotten some math wrong.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Madam Auditor, would you please read 1041 City of Green River again? It's at the very bottom of the 18s. I believe we may be off on that one by about $510,000. Just comparing my numbers to yours.
Oh.
That amount matches what was approved for the town of Burlington. So I wonder if there's perhaps a cell that was just omitted that would have accounted for that.
Were you 1,255,000?
I had 1,255,000 for the reduction, and I believe the auditor stated the reduction to be 1,765,000.
Mr. Chairman, the reduction should be, sorry, I was overthinking it. 1,510,000 is the reduction, but the due fund amount I said would have been hopefully correct of 5,735,000. Or are those both wrong? Oh, gotcha. Mr. Chairman, the due fund would be 5,990,000.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Auditor, I have if we remove 1,255,000, that gets us to the full 50 for everything that's been approved, and the funding amount would be 6,245,000. I'm looking to see if anyone else has been running the numbers. Okay.
And I believe you offered to share the screen. I think that would be a good thing to do. What I propose to do now is to walk through the projects as they are and that have been reduced, just to hear if this compromises the project, or if the awardee just says they want to withdraw the project from consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I will second it, so it's on the table as a motion.
Yeah. I was going to recognize your second, but I wanted to kind of walk through this to hear it, so we didn't have to spend a lot of time with amendments, but. I'll recognize your motion, so motion's there. So are we prepared?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I still think I maybe have the due fund on Green River should be.
What I'm hoping is that the numbers that are on the screen here will reflect what your motion is.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You can
Yes.
quickly check them.
Green River.
Whatever brings it to 50 million. Perfect, yes, great.
I think we can, if there are any mathematical errors that are discovered at a later date, I think this is where OSLI will go this particular amount to square any.
Do you want to
square the circle.
Do you want to take a minute to just make sure the math is correct?
Mr. Chairman, I will recheck all of the formulas right now.
Let's take a moment to do that so we have the numbers on the screen, people are aware of them, and then we'll proceed through there.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer.
While we're doing this, could I ask the department a couple of questions about, we said that we had a lot of other programs that are coming forward. Do we know the dates of those that we're going to be making decisions on those? I think most of them, or a lot of them, will before the spring construction season, I would think.
Mr. Governor, Mr. Treasurer, the funding for local governments that water and sewer projects are also available for, that application period will open in December. It will be a 6-week period and it will close in the middle of January. The reason for the delay is to allow new administrations to come on board since elections will be happening, and to ensure that the new administration agrees with the applications that the prior administration had put in. So that's the delay for those. We will be applying for our infrastructure money at the beginning of the year or the end of this calendar year. We are just trying to get through the ARPA programs before we took on that beast. So, but we do have SRF funding available at this time. While we don't have principal forgiveness, we do have decreased interest rates that entities would qualify for. So there's funds there. There's over $130 million in each clean water and drinking water program. So they would just benefit from a lower interest rate rather than the standard 2.5% interest rate.
And how much money is in the December tranche?
The December tranche will also include $50 million. And that tranche is open to any eligible ARPA type project. Water and sewer do take a lower priority in that program, but we don't know what we'll receive.
And the infrastructure tranche has how many million in it?
The infrastructure program will bring hundreds of millions of dollars in for the SRF program between all of the pots of money.
But that goes to SRF.
Yes, sir.
It just adds to that. It's not a separate ARPA type structure.
No, sir, it's not. It's additional money added to the SRF program. And so it'll be administered through that program.
Thanks.
All right, and Mr. Miller, or is it Mr. Peters that's running this? Could you freeze your top column? So as we walk down through it.
And Mr. Chairman, may I clarify one thing that I do believe I said wrong?
Okay.
The amount proposed to be removed from Green River's due fund recommendation, I misstated. That would be 1,255,000, and that would be a due fund rec of 6,245,000.
Right. Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Auditor, could you say the amount that is going to be removed again? What was that?
Mr. Chairman, 1,255,000.
1 million. Okay, thank you.
So in both Gillette and in Green River, the $255 is recognized in the reduction that was otherwise. So So I'm going to recommend, board, without objection, that we walk down from the screen by screen on what's in front of us. And I'm just going to recognize, I think, those that have seen reductions. And so I think the first one, if I understand it, is North Sweetwater Water and Sewer District lagoon modifications and Reliance Collection System improvements. The amount has been reduced by $1 million. So the award is $5,200,000. And if the engineer would come forward and address whether that is okay. Mr. Finney?
Mr. Finney, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Brian Finney, Keller Associates, representing North Sweetwater Water and Sewer District. The district is able to work their project with that $1 million reduction. So a funding of $5.2 million will allow them to replace their collection system and take care of that project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I think next on the list was a reduction of the City of Sheridan Dow and Burkett Street project. The award is now $2,840,000. Could you identify yourself for the record too?
Yes, certainly. Rich Bridger, Mayor of the City of Sheridan. Other than just to say we're committed at this point, we're working with our partners from WIDOT. It's our Main Street reconstruction. We're digging up our old utilities while we're busy doing that. And so that's part of this is primarily what this money is being used for. We're using cap tax money to fund it as well, and we'll pull from other projects to get it done. But we appreciate the recognition and thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much. Okay. And then next one, if I'm correct, is the City of Gillette 1012 wastewater treatment plant headworks facility. The award is now $5,245,000. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Governor, members of the board. First and foremost, thank you for your consideration. And we request a special dispensation. I'm not speaking for the other communities that have received a reduced amount of funding. Can we have a proviso whereupon if project committed funds are not committed by 24 or expended by 25, whatever staff could recommend, can we have those monies? Because by that time, it'd be very difficult for Slib to reconsider projects at that time. Rather than returning those funds to the federal government, would Slib consider retroactively considering all of the communities that have taken a reduced funding amount? That's our request at this time. But thank you very much for your consideration.
So, Madam Auditor, as the maker of the motion, what's your thought?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I think that's an excellent idea. I think it's perhaps maybe what we would do anyway, as there's always a project or two that can't come to fruition in time. And so there could be one or two on this list where we get all the money back. And Miss Blackwell is usually very in touch with that. And I think we would very much be amenable to making sure we get these projects that we have funded over the finish line before starting. And yes, recognizing these projects cannot be started in November of 2024, for sure.
And for the record, we pray and hope that every project is able to launch by 24, 25, completed by 26. But if there is that possibility, that all the communities that had to reduce funding, thank you very much.
And let me just, the concern I thought I heard in you is that this would delay your project, and no, the reduced funding will not delay.
We are committed, and
Okay.
that retro portion would be, we'd be able to take advantage of that, because we're going to proceed with the project with loan components.
Okay.
And if we can retro that would be perfect.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. City of Casper, wastewater treatment plant secondary rehabilitation. Your award is now $1 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bruce Martin, Public Utilities Manager for the City of Casper. And first, appreciate the opportunity to be here and your guys' consideration on this. And I appreciate the effort on the staff working through this. I know I pestered them with several emails, and I'm sure others did as well, so appreciate them working through this. In regards to the project, make no bones, losing $2 million on it hurts the project, hurts our operations. We are committed on this project. We are able to move it forward and complete it. It will impact some of our other projects that we have. We'll move those projects down the road a little bit, but we are committed to completing this one and appreciate the grant as recommended, and appreciate Representative Simpson's comments this morning, and hopeful for the other opportunities to come forward here in the future. So appreciate that.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Now, if we could step down, I believe the next one is the City of Green River, with the award now being $6,245,000.
Mr. Chairman, we gratefully acknowledge and appreciate the consideration of the board in these matters, and echo the sentiments of those who have spoken before us. We're just grateful to be here and to be considered, and we'll move this project forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one is 1174 Teton Village Water and Sewer District Improvements 2022 project. Do we have somebody online, Mr. Bump?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Josh Kilpatrick.
Mr. Kilpatrick, is this the project you're wanting to address?
Yes, it is. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary and Board. Josh Kilpatrick with Nelson Engineering, speaking on behalf of the Teton Village Water and Sewer District. Appreciate everybody's time and consideration this morning for funding this wastewater.
We can barely hear you, sir.
Oh, you can? Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry about that.
That was $540,000, 959.
Correct. So just speaking on behalf of this project, I did get a call last week from a representative with SRF, and we had some discussions on reducing the amount of funding. And I appreciate I guess it would be the recommendations that were provided prior to this meeting, just to kind of give you an idea where we stand with this project. Originally, we had an $8 million budget. We bid this project out last month for 10.5. So we're about a $2.5 million shortfall with the project. And so when we had heard that we were potentially going to get $2 million, which is pretty critical, which is critical to finishing some expansion items specific to the treatment plant, we're obviously very grateful in hearing that. So with that, I guess in order to keep this project moving forward, we would hope maybe reconsider keeping the original amount that was recommended.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Let me ask a little more pointed question. Without the award, do you see the project not being able to be accomplished?
With that, we would probably have to seek out more SRF funding.
Okay.
To move forward.
Ms. Blackwell.
My one question is, we just increased your SRF loan at the meeting earlier in October. Your public meeting minutes state that if you receive the ARPA funds, you won't be using your SRF loan. Can you please talk to that?
Okay, so we have currently about $4.2 million in SRF loan funding that has been approved to this point. We were going to fund half the project with district funds out of the reserve accounts, 4 million of that. And then now which gets us to that 8 million with the ARPA funding. We appreciate the SRF funding, but with the ARPA funding, because of the way the bids worked out, which we just bid this project out, I guess it would have been September 8th of this year. When they came in, low bid was 10.5 million. I think that's kind of where the disconnect is here is there's this difference of 2.5 million that may not have been included in our application. That would actually be the final project cost.
Ms. Blackwell, any follow-up? Just note for the record, that's 13% of what they requested. So, okay,
Mr. Chairman, may I ask him a question?
yes.
And thanks for tuning in. I didn't totally understand the response to the last question. Are you able to use the additional granted loan?
Yes,
For
so
this
with,
purpose?
with the granted loan and the reserves that we have on hand, we can do an $8 million project.
Could you repeat that?
Sorry, with the SRF loan funding that we have, which totals 4.2 million, and then our reserve accounts, which the district has planned to self-fund to the tune of $4 million. That puts us at $8.2 million, which is short of the $10.5 million that we would need to construct the project.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Blackwell, does that comport with the records you have of the SRF loan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And again, I want to note, this is a 13% Teton County. Teton County is a recapture district now that helps fund school districts around the state. And I just, you know, I want to make sure that we don't just hit Teton because Teton is Teton. So, Mr. Treasurer.
When would the construction schedule to begin and end on this particular project?
So right now we have a 60-day grace period before the district has to issue the notice of award to the contractor. So that 60 days is up November 7th, next month. After that, we would start. If we don't have the funding, essentially, we may be forced to rebid the project at a reduced scope.
I missed some of that, Mr. Chairman. Part of the last comment.
Yeah, if you can stay close to your microphone.
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, I apologize. So what I said is, if we don't get the funding, we may be forced to rebid the project at a reduced scope.
Still lost you. Still lost you. We may be forced.
Okay.
We didn't, you said we may be forced and then we lost.
Oh, sorry. I said we may be forced to rebid the project at a reduced scope.
To rebid the project at a reduced scope. Is that what you said?
Correct.
Right.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So those are all our reductions. I'm assuming that all the people that were awarded after the fact are happy with their awards. Is there anyone that wants to address the board from the town of Dixon, town of Glen Rock, town of Big Piney, town of Glen Rock, town of Afton, town of Star Valley, town of Upton, city of Cheyenne? Oh, there's nothing to award there. Town of DuBois. Any of those individuals? Mr. Lidstrom. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you all for your consideration. I do deeply appreciate it, and we'll move forward with our project. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you. So any further discussion? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Governor, members of the board, I'm Kara Losick with the town of Big Piney, and I just want to thank you for your consideration. In Big Piney, we're a smaller community, only 395 people, but we're 19%, our average median income of our residents is 19% under the state average. And so although we continue to raise our water rates, our sewer rates and stuff, you know, we do what we can as a community. And we definitely submitted this application out of kind of dire need, and our bid project ran 63% over engineered estimated costs. And so I just want to thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you very much for addressing the board. Mr. Lidstrom.
Thank you. My name again is Chris Lidstone, and I'm here today as Town of Dixon. And again, I'd like to thank the same. Is over the course of trying to even look at the ARPA grants, we've looked from a $6 million project to a $5 million project, and we reduced the project size just on the basis of how much we could match. So we do appreciate your efforts. And one of our biggest issues was non-compliance, which is certainly similar to Burlington with both DEQ and EPA, similar lagoon project. And we do appreciate everything that this board has looked at. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Further comment? Further, Mr. Treasurer.
And this is to the Teton Village. Are you under any DEQ or EPA, I guess, violations or orders?
So, Mr. Kilpatrick, if you're still on, the treasurer addressed a question to you.
I apologize. Could you please restate the question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether or not Teton Village Water and Sewer District is under any EPA or DEQ or any other regulatory orders or violations.
It is not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing, yeah.
What was your last comment?
Oh, I was just saying that, and it's probably happening somewhat around the state as well, but we're just seeing significant growth here in Teton County and to move forward with this project.
Quite hear you again. So.
Okay. I'm done commenting. I realize you can't hear me, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, further comment? Further comment?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure I have this right for Glen Rock. We're going with the director's recommendation of $0. Is that correct?
There are 2 Glen Rock projects, right?
Mr. Chairman, my motion included funding their first priority.
Which is 118, which is
1118, yeah. $1 million, and then not funding their second priority, which is 1129.
Okay, thank you.
very good. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to commend the auditor and treasurer on their numbers here and the work they did on pushing some of this down to some of these other communities. That's just absolutely great. And for those communities that there was a reduction, especially those that voluntarily, offered that they could, I really appreciate that. And thank you, guys.
Thanks. Further comment?
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Auditor.
I would just note that I think my math error of 510,000 was probably Burlington's fault.
Thanks, Madam Auditor. Any other
Mr.
comment?
Chairman,
Madam Director.
this might be a little bit out of order, but Mr. Miller and I were talking, and if in fact the board might consider doing something a little bit different with the town of DuBois, it might free up some more money for Teton Village if in fact the board is interested in that. The town of DuBois, on their number 16 priority, it's their second priority. It's the one at the bottom. And if the board wanted to look at maybe funding their number 1 priority, which is, it is ranked at 14, but it is their number 1, and that would free up $900,000 to maybe address the other issue. That's just a suggestion, and I'll leave it there.
Mr. Chairman, I actually did consider that, but I didn't know if that was possible since we had put that first priority to bed.
You can move to reconsider that, I
Okay.
guess. But we're kind of out of a lot of order at this point, so. So, but I think you could, if a person could amend to remove 1205 the town of Du Bois, we could vote, and then we could reconsider. Does that make sense to the board?
Mr. Chairman, how about to remove and replace it with the number one priority? And then we vote on that, and if that goes forward, you could move to fund that in whole, and then the difference go to Teton.
If the board is okay with that, and I want an affirmative from everybody, if the board is okay with that, I think that's not strictly correct, but I think if the board is okay with it, let's do it. It's simple and efficient. So I would accept an amendment from the treasurer.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I would offer an amendment to remove ARPA number 1205 and replace that with ARPA number 1210 being the first priority of the town of Du Bois for the amount of $1,089,975. What's the difference between those two? That's what you were doing, weren't you? And ask for a second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. So Mr. Miller, let's make sure we have that correct.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And now we would just need to adjust Teton Villages.
Right.
And so
And so the balance would then go to Teton Village.
Mr. Chairman, I calculate that would be a due fund to Teton Village for 1,422,637.
Mr. Chairman, I would.
Mr.
now-
Treasurer.
I would now make a motion that we fund Teton Village in the amount of 1,422,637.
Okay, Mr. Treasurer, hold on for that for a second. We had the amendment and we haven't voted on it.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah,
all in
yeah.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Mr. Treasurer.
And I would make the motion, Mr. Chairman, that we fund number 1174 Teton Village Water and Sewer District in the amount of $1,422,637.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Is there support for the treasurer's motion?
Second.
It's been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are now on the main motion that's been amended.
I got it right here.
1,422,637. And I thank the director for calling attention to a number one that saved us money and stretched it.
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Chairman, I
Director.
can't take the credit. It was Mr. Miller and his
Bravo.
his
bravo.
fast analysis.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for working this. So we are on the main motion now, and I think it's all displayed. Are we familiar with what it is, or do we want to read through the whole thing? We're familiar with it. So I will ask for any further discussion. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, members of the board, for your work. You can charge me time of gripe, and I, yes.
Mr. Chairman, could we get that final spreadsheet emailed over to us? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Blackwell.
Mr. Governor, I just wanted to let everyone know that's listening that the office does have a contract with Midwest Assistance Program to provide technical assistance to small systems. People just need to reach out to our office and we can get them in contact with them
And you would be reached
at 307-777-6373.
And your name is?
My name is Beth Blackwell. And also we have an internal engineer that replaced Keenan. His name's Kevin. And let me pull up his phone number. I just lost it. They can call my phone number and I'll get them in touch with him.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer, I didn't know if Ms. Sewell was going to say something. Okay, Mr. Treasurer, go ahead.
Could we impose upon the Office of State Lands to send any helpful information to both the Wyoming Association municipalities and the County Commissioners Organization?
Be happy to.
Yeah, thank you very much. You probably do already. I just want to make sure.
All right. Further matters to come before the board? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's been seconded by the auditor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. We are adjourned.